welcome to another Q&A session. I am joined for the second time by Martina. Martina, thanks so much for joining us. I know that we tried to do this right before the DNV got released, the Digital Nomad got released. So excited to kind of give a round two and see if we can't provide an update on this visa category.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me. Timing was extremely unfortunate where we recorded this video with lots of Q&A and then the Digital Nomad Visa got released.
Yeah, it was a great video too. Yeah, it was such a good video. Unfortunately, though, we were just like, we can't. Everyone's going to be asking about that because we talked specifically about how it's not obviously out yet.
And so it is out now. It's still not 100% clear, but it's out, and there are some things that can be said about it, though it's still very much in beta testing mode, I would say. Just as a general overview before we get into the Digital Nomad Visa specifically, I would like to start off with the number one question I get asked every single time, which is, can I apply for a visa from inside the country as a tourist? And the answer is no. Sorry for being so blunt, but all visa applications, regardless of which type, and we're going to be going through the various types today, but all visa applications need to be filed at the consulate, the Italian consulate or embassy of reference for your place of residence. And that means that when you file the application, you will have to present proof of residence, either in the form of ID or perhaps a utility bill, a driver's license, something like that. But bear in mind that if you are in Italy as a tourist, there is unfortunately no way to convert that type of visa to obtain some kind of residency permit directly in Italy. You will have to go back to your home country. So make sure to account for that while planning and timing.
Okay. And so just one thing to note, if anyone isn't aware, I'm in Iceland getting my MBA. I do have residency. So in that circumstance, if I were to want to apply to Italy, because I have legal residency with a permit, exactly, I can apply from Iceland, correct?
You could definitely apply from Iceland, yes. But you can't apply, say, going to Spain for 3 months as a tourist and say, I'm going to apply from Spain because I'm in Spain, because that's not residency.
Yeah.
But if you are studying in another country, you're resident in another country. I had a case where we had someone from California who was resident in Germany, and therefore she applied in Germany. So yeah, okay, definitely that can be done. But she had a permit for employment in Germany.
Okay. Yeah, and probably most importantly, that residence permit. So, not just the employment, but the permit.
Yes, you need to have a valid residence permit. And I would suggest not close to expiration with at least 3 months left, because processing times on visa applications are 90 to 120 days. And therefore, you need to have a legal title to be able to stay in that country while your visa application is being processed.
Okay, perfect. So good to note there. If you're in Italy, unfortunately, you have to go home first, as you can't apply in country. So let's say, though, that you do, we can obviously dive into some eligibility, but let's say that you do get that visa application approved, you're able to obtain residency permit. How long is this awarded for, this Digital Nomad Visa, this permit that you eventually obtain? And maybe you can also elaborate on what that permit process looks like and how it differentiates from a visa.
Okay, absolutely. So to be very simple, the visa allows you to go into the country. So the visa allows you entry into Italy. The permit allows you to stay. You cannot stay in Italy on a visa. That's, visa is used kind of indifferently in the same way as permit is used, but they're actually two very different things. So the visa will be stamped on your passport, and it will say you can go to Italy from now up to 365 days. So that means you will have 1 year to enter Italy. Once you get to Italy, you have 8 working days, so very short time, to file your residency permit application. And I just like to take a step back and go back to the application procedure, if that's okay with you, and then go to the permit. Do you want a general visa overview or just a digital nomad?
Well, I know that it's always kind of helpful to understand that we can obviously assist with any visa. So if you want to kind of highlight that as well, I mean, we can do all visa categories here. Then we can dive in specifically to the DNV, as that's kind of the most popular one right now. But
I would say probably the simplest visas we can look at for staying for a long-term stay are probably elective residency, student, and Digital Nomad Visa. And then there's a few more types of visas, like the Entrepreneur Visa, if you're willing to invest a lot of money, the Investor Visa, if you're willing to also invest a lot of money, but not to create a company, but to, buy state titles or invest in companies. Self-employment and employment. Those are trickier to obtain. So let's stay on the simpler ones. Student visa, you simply need a certificate of enrollment for your course. And then obviously you have to prove that you have the financial requirements to be able to support yourself within the country. You have to prove you have adequate accommodation, therefore a rental contract. For rental contracts, I would suggest something that is called a transitory contract in Italy that can go up to 18 months. Otherwise, the regular rental contract is 4 years plus 4 years, which can be rescinded under certain conditions. But usually rental contracts are required in order to be able to apply for a visa. Occasionally, Airbnb bookings will be accepted, very rarely. So, do not bank on the consulate accepting your application. It's more frequently accepted for visas for employment because it's considered a temporary solution while you're looking for your permanent apartment. So self-employment, employment, and digital nomad more often see the Airbnb accepted as an accommodation, but not for the permit. So you will get it for the visa purposes, but then we'll have to get a rental. So my suggestion is to just try to get a rental right from the get-go. And then, as I mentioned, you will need the certificate of enrollment for your course, which needs to provide for at least 20 hours of study per week. The permit shall remain in effect for the duration of your course. It can be renewed if your course continues. This means that you could also enter Italy on a language course, provided that language course is 20 hours per week, and you will be able to have a valid permit of stay for the duration of that course, obviously. Elective Residency Visa is Visto per Residenza Elettiva, and this visa is for individuals who want to move to Italy without working. Typically, it's for retirees or those with sufficient financial means to support themselves without employment. Key requisites are proof of financial independence. So you need to demonstrate substantial income or savings, typically around 31,000 for individual. This amount is higher on a discretional basis, decided by the consulate, usually around 20% higher for every dependent that you are taking with you. Yeah. So consider at least 31,000. If, however, you purchase an apartment, then the financial requisite is waived. It's considered automatically met. So if you buy a house and apply for elective residency, the financial requirement will be considered met. But consider, of course, that because it's not possible to work on an elective residency visa, the visa is only granted if you have passive source of income that is considered to be continuous. Therefore, that is likely to continue in the future without you doing any work. This could be dividends, rental property, pension, retirement fund, anything like that. And you need health insurance, comprehensive health insurance valid in Italy, covering a minimum of 30,000 in expenses. And as I mentioned, no work is allowed. Digital Nomad Visa, the one that everyone was waiting for. It is still in development. And what I mean by this is that the legislation is a little bit unclear. So it can be requested, but not all consulates have the same way of approaching this. But to be fair, they don't approach other types of visas in the same way either. So yeah. I wouldn't say that makes a difference. You need a remote work verification. This means proof that you have been working remotely for at least 6 months. This visa is for either remote workers employed by companies outside of Italy or self-employed individuals who can work digitally. Self-employed individuals who can work digitally have an easier route because they just get to Italy and can set up their taxation and social contribution position in a way that's easier. There's no need for to go look at the treaties for social contributions between the country of origin and Italy. Whereas remote workers have a tougher time because they're directly hired from another country. Self-employment would be required to open a VAT number and work as a freelancer set up in Italy and therefore to pay taxes in Italy. Whereas remote workers are a little bit tricky and need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. You need proof of income, so you need to show at least 28,000 euros per year. The expectation is that this type of visa is for highly skilled and highly specialized individuals. This means that the consulate may require you to produce copy of statements of study, certifications, contractual work, anything that may substantiate this claim and show that you are a highly skilled individual in your field. Proof of accommodation as per other types of visas, either rented or owned, health insurance, 30,000 euros or $50,000. And under this visa, it's not possible to work in the country. What I mean for this is it's not possible to take on local employment. So you can't be hired by an Italian company on a digital nomad visa. At that point, you would just go for an employment visa. All of these types of visas allow you to apply for a residency permit, which is normally issued for 1 year and then can be renewed if all of the requisites remain valid. And usually, actually the renewal depends on the type of visa. It can be 1 year, it can be 2 years, depending on what was the original visa which was granted. As I mentioned before, once you're in Italy, you need to apply for a residency permit. You have 8 days to do that, 8 calendar days, which means that Saturday and Sunday don't count. The way to apply is not the best, but for transparency's sake, we will go into it. It's you have to go to a postal office, pick up a postal kit, fill it in by hand, and give it back to the postal office by paying also the taxes that are due on the application. You will then have an appointment set with the police office, and during that appointment, they will take fingerprints and then issue the residency permit. Now, while it is possible to obviously do all this yourself, at least for the residency permit step, I would definitely recommend help from an attorney or someone who is specialized in the matter, because the application is entirely in Italian. Consulates usually speak home language, so it's easier to file the visa application. But once you're in Italy, definitely the residency permit needs to be filed in Italian. It's a very confusing form to fill in, so definitely advise getting help there.
Amazing. Okay, so there's a lot that we just went through, and I have a few follow-up questions that I want to kind of jump back to.
Sorry, did I go too fast?
No, it was good. I just kind of wanted to dissect because there's a few things that popped up along the way. So you said that the residence permits can be extended for up to 2 years, and then you have to find another visa category, or is that continuously extendable?
No, it's continuously extendable. So you get your first residency permit for 1 year. Let's talk about, for example, self-employment. Self-employment is 1 year, the first residency permit. When you renew it, it's granted for 2 years. So it's blocks of 2 years. At the expiration of the 2 years, you have to renew it again. Once you've had 5 years of continuing stay in Italy, so long-term stay, you can then apply for a long-term EU permit, and that gives you the possibility to have a permit that does not need to be renewed. So you can just stay in Europe indefinitely. Once you have spent 10 years in Italy, you can then apply for citizenship if you want to. Otherwise, you can just stay on your long-term permit. It's unclear at this point if the digital nomad visa will also allow to accrue the amount of time that you need for a long-term permit or citizenship. I don't see why not, but because it has been introduced this year, it's not practically 100% certain. The important thing is to maintain residence, though, because the long-term permit is granted when you have maintained residence in Italy for 5 years. This means essentially spending more than 183 days within the country. Otherwise, you risk the renewal being denied on the basis of the fact that you are not truly resident in the country, but you are a tax and legal resident of somewhere else.
Okay. And then just to clarify something else you just said right there, is that Europe permit after 5 years that you'd apply for, is that, you said you can stay in Europe. You can stay in the Schengen, but you still have to be a resident in Italy, right? It's not like you get 5 years and then you can go live in Spain for the next few years. No. You have to stay in Italy.
Yes, it's a long-term EU permit. It's called that way because there's a similar type of permit in almost every European state, but it still means that you're living in Italy. And you are allowed to travel within Europe as you would be on a 1 year permit. The big advantage is that you do not need to renew it any further.
I just feel like I always have to clarify that because people, especially from the US, are always like, They're like, oh,
That's fair.
Schengen is Europe. It's like, no, it's country
No.
by country. So,
But I will add this. If you have a long-term EU permit from another state, so say you have a long-term EU permit in Spain or in Germany, that under specific circumstances can be converted into a permit for Italy. So
really?
You don't have to go back, yes, and reapply from your home country. Obviously, it has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, so take this with a grain of salt.
Okay.
But for example, someone with a long EU permit in Germany could convert to a self-employment permit for Italy and skip the visa application.
Wow.
It goes through a slightly different procedure. There may be a similar procedure going out of Italy towards any other countries. I don't know, but maybe worth looking into. But yeah, so long-term EU permits do have some benefits under this perspective, yeah.
And then kind of just jumping back into something else with the Digital Nomad Visa specifically, you talked about employees being a little bit of a different route, maybe a little bit more difficult or maybe not as streamlined as just a self-employed employee. And that's just I wanted to highlight and revisit this just because it's the fact that an employer has to pay taxes because they're a full-time employee. And so it's the transfer of like Social Security. And so with that being said, Spain, obviously, we kind of have something similar happening there. It's similar to Italy. So for a W-2 employee, specifically from the U.S., this might be a difficult visa to try for. Is that correct?
It might. It might. I don't really have a 100% certain answer for you right now. In the sense, what I think would happen is that the visa would be granted, but the possibility is to have issues in the future for Social Security contributions. It has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and what needs to be done is to check whether there are treaties for Social Security between Italy and the country of residence. In some cases, it may be tricky because Italy would request specific forms for application that sometimes I know the US doesn't provide.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, no,
I don't know that's where you were.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might. I'm sure that if we repeat this interview in a year, then we'll have more clear answers.
Yeah.
And also what's tricky for employed is not just the social contributions, but also the taxation aspect. Because as I mentioned, for self-employed, you reach Italy, you open your VAT number, your partita IVA, and with that, you are good to go. You can invoice companies all over the world. All you have to do is declare your income to the Italian taxes and pay a significant amount of it in taxes, which is, all you have to do. But at least it's simple. It's relatively simple. Whereas if an employer is withholding your taxes, and you come to Italy and you stay there for more than 1 year, technically you should be considered a tax resident of Italy, but also your employer has withheld your taxes in the US. So that's what remains to be understood. What usually happens is that the Italian Revenue Agency, the Agenzia delle Entrate, will at a certain point submit their clarifications called interpelli, explaining what they believe is the case. And hopefully we will have a bit more clarity on that.
Okay. All right. So then one other thing is shifting over to a student visa. If you remember way back when we were talking about that, you have to, again, apply for this as well with any other application outside of the country.
Yes.
And then what are the taxes? Yeah, any visa, everything. What are the taxes associated with a student? Because I know typically you have to register within 180 something days, but as you're a student, is there any differentiation there? Or how does that work?
You mean taxes related to income from employment?
Yeah, because, are you not allowed to work at all? Typically, I know it's like 20 hours or something a week. I didn't know if that was the case.
Typically, so it doesn't prohibit employment, but it's also difficult to set it up correctly. So I would recommend, if you're planning on being a student who is also working, definitely have a chat with an Italian-based commercialista, an accountant, so he could guide you better solutions. I personally think that if you are a tax resident of Italy and you are also working, then you also become liable to pay taxes in Italy.
Yep. Okay. And then another thing, I don't know if we touched on it, dependents and on the Digital Nomad Visa specifically, Is that something that's allowed or no?
Dependents are allowed on all types of visas, but it's not the fastest process. You have to request there are two types of dependent visa, but they're essentially the same thing. What differentiates them is whether the dependent is coming with you to Italy or whether you are already in Italy and requesting them to join you. That's the difference in name. The easier way is actually going first and then having your dependents join you, because that means that you will have the rental property on place. And that's actually something that you need 100%, especially if your dependents are children. The Italian authorities want to see that they have an accommodation that is adequate. So what will have to be done is you will need to request a nulla osta, a no impediment from Italian authorities called prefettura. The prefettura will verify if all requirements are met. So if you have the income to support your dependents, because dependents are considered non-income earning for the purposes of a visa. So that means that if you are asking a dependent to join you in Italy, then you need to provide for them. And therefore you need to show that you have enough income, enough savings, enough whatever to be able to provide for them. And that means, again, income, adequate housing. If it's children, copies of birth certificates, passports, other elements are required on a case-by-case basis. Depends if everyone is moving or is it just the child and the other parent is staying abroad. Lots of cases. But yes, it's possible. You need a higher income and you need to get this additional documentation, which does take some time. Therefore, if you are planning for that, make sure to account for an extra visa application. Because I don't know if I mentioned this, I think I missed the most important part, but the dependent cannot apply for permit on the basis of your permit. The dependent must apply for a visa on the basis of your visa. So before entering the country.
Okay.
Which means that his visa or her visa, their visa, will be linked to your visa as main visa holder. Therefore, logically, from a chronological perspective, you will need to get your visa first, and then the dependent can apply as family. Dependents are under Italian law that can come to Italy are only spouses and children, and under certain conditions, parents. For medical expenses, for example. You cannot have your brother as a dependent, for example.
Yeah. And then a question I typically get a lot is, can my husband or wife come over and work remotely while I'm working?
Phrase it again.
Sorry, I was.
So like
can my
on a
husband or wife
tourist or
no? So
or as a dependent visa?
as a dependent on like a digital nomad visa, for example, can their legal spouse come over and work remotely as they're working remotely?
Well, I mean, at that point, I would suggest just having because you still need to apply for another visa.
So you're just saying apply for digital nomad visa
apply for another for another employment visa at that point. But yes, dependents often, it depends. In most cases, dependents can be eligible to work in Italy once they obtain their residence permit. Children can attend school in Italy. But if the dependent is in a similar working position, so they're also working digitally, it would honestly make more sense for them to have their own visa and their own permit at that point. Because the tricky part with having a permit that is dependent on someone else's permit is that if someone else's permit expires, then your permit expires as well.
Okay, yeah.
It's mostly linked.
Okay. Well, wonderful. So I think we've pretty much covered everything in a general basis. Obviously, this is very generalized advice. So if you're interested, reach out to us specifically through Citizen Remote. You can find Italy, schedule a direct consultation with Martina. Because that's important, is that everything varies a little bit. So what we talked about might be slightly different. But yeah, I mean, we talked about taxes, requirements, incomes. I mean, all of the generals. So this was really, really helpful. It helped me understand a lot more. Is there anything that you think that we missed?
No, not specifically. Just absolutely, I would stress get a tax consultation because there is so much false information on the internet. Like the other day, someone sent me an article saying Italy has this regime where you are only paying 5% tax. And that is a very, very small part of the story, and it doesn't really work that way. And then in the end, it works out to actually paying somewhere around 30% between taxes and social contributions. But it is phrased in a way that is extremely misleading. So the journey doesn't stop with getting a visa and a permit, right? You need to know what you're getting into. And taxation is one of the main aspects of having then to live in Italy. So I would strongly advise, to get a simulation on your tax situation. Just to give a very, very brief overview, I'm not a tax advisor, but if you are self-employed on a digital nomad visa, there are normally two fiscal regimes you can benefit from. One is the reduced taxation, that famous 5%. Which would apply if you make under 85,000 euros per year. But again, it's not really 5%. I want to stress that. It's like 5% plus social contributions, which ends up being a lot higher. And then there's another one, which is called Impatriati, which is a simplified regime for people making over 85,000 euros. This is very, very simplistic on my side. There's so many more specifics. But again, get a simulation done with an accountant, because otherwise it's going to be shocking when the revenue agency comes knocking. And so, it's not just moving to Italy can be great, but it's not all dreams and unicorns, to put it that way.
Absolutely. And that's really good to point out, because obviously once you get there, you relocate there, you're going to have to file taxes that following year.
Exactly.
And usually people think, oh, I've heard about this 5% or something. Like almost always, if you're coming from, especially the US, I know UK has a little bit higher taxes, but like a place like the US, just expect that you're probably going to be paying more taxes in Europe. That's how it works.
Probably. Here, you might also, depending on what visa type it is, you might also have national health insurance covered. So, there's pros and cons. But just, I think having a surprise factor when it comes to taxes is not a good idea. Another thing, for example, people don't know is if you have a VAT number, you're self-employed, you will be asked to pay in advance you pay your taxes for the year, and then you're asked to pay in advance on next year's taxes, which is equal to what you've paid for those year's taxes.
Okay.
So it seems a lot higher than you're paying, like double taxation because you're paying in advance on next year's. But people don't know this. So they get this shocking amount and they think, what is this? And so it's good to, be informed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then really quickly on the health insurance. Yeah, I think that there is obviously benefits to the taxes, because people will be shocked. We'll be talking with people and I'll tell them what they can expect to pay for a year. And they're like, that's monthly, right? And I'm like, no, that's for the whole year. And they're like, so mind blown. So, obviously, definitely pros to it as well. So Martina, thank you so much. This has been incredibly helpful. Again, I urge anyone who's interested in getting relocation assistance to Italy for the Digital Nomad Visa, student visa, anything else. I know you're helping somebody right now with a citizenship, ancestry.
Yes, Iure Sanguinis, the descendants and citizenship.
Yeah,
definitely. That's something else entirely.
But there are any pathway we can you can assist them with and explore and obtain visa and permanent residency and all that stuff. So Martina, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.